Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca. It's nice to meet you. So for today's video, I've been seeing a lot of tier ranking videos on YouTube, and I especially wanted to rank all of the books I've ever ranked above a 4.5 stars. Since I'm very picky with my 5-star books, there's only like a couple of books that I've rated 5 stars. So I decided to include all of the books I've rated 4.5 or more. This is how I decided to divide my tiers and how I'm ranking the books. First, it altered my brain chemistry. Basically, this space is for a book that literally changed my life, and I constantly think about, like, if not daily, every other day I think about these books. I think I'm a different person because I read this book. I think they're perfect. I think every word was where it was supposed to be. I have no complaints. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that I will die and these books will still be inside this category. So, moving on. Lives in my head rent-free. This is a book that didn't alter my brain chemistry. Like, it didn't change me as a person necessarily. But I do think it's a book that deserves a special place and a special mention. Just books that I know if I pick up again, I'll rate 5 stars every single time. And it's books that literally live in my head rent-free. I always think about them. I always and constantly recommend them. But they didn't necessarily alter my brain chemistry, basically. I'll Die on That Hill is the category for just books that yes, I rated that book what I rated that book, and I'll die on that hill, and I stand by that rating. And they didn't alter my brain chemistry. I don't think about them constantly, but I wouldn't change my rating either. Like, I stand by it, and I think they're great books. I probably think everyone should read them, but I'm not obsessed with them. Charity work is a category for basically books that I think I was doing charity work when I gave them that rating. Basically, they didn't deserve that rating in my personal opinion as a reader now. Probably if I read them again, I would lower that rating. And then She Doesn't Even Go Here is for the books that I probably rated way too high, and that I'm sure that if I ever read again, they wouldn't even go here. They wouldn't even be among these books at all. This is in no specific order, by the way, and also for some context, I'm Colombian, so my first language is Spanish, so I also read a lot of Latin American literature. So if there's weird titles among these books, that's why. So the first one is Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a Colombian author, and he actually has a Nobel Prize for Literature. He basically is famous for his magical realism. He does it in such a beautiful way. I'm obsessed with his writing. And this specific book lives in my head rent-free. It didn't necessarily alter my brain chemistry, as in I don't think I changed as a person. I just love the story so much, and I think the writing was beautiful, and I think it was so creative, and I just constantly think about that story. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in Lives in My Head Rent-Free. 1984 is by George Orwell, and it's one of the classics, I would say. This book, I think I read in a time where I was just starting to question lots of things in society. I think it altered my brain chemistry better than the movies. This book is a great book. If you haven't read it, it's just a YA romance. Really cute. I love the characters. I don't think it altered my brain chemistry, and I don't think it lives in my head rent-free, but I'll die on that hill that this book is a great book. And I do recommend it if you're in a mood for a romance, for a very light and fun romance. I think this book is a really fun time. Kingdom of Ash. So Kingdom of Ash is the last book in the Throne of Glass series, and I ate that book up. I think it's a 5-star series, but this book specifically is just so politics heavy, and I just love how Sarah J. Maas writes politics. I would say I'll Die on That Hill. I don't think it lives in my head rent-free, honestly. Flawless is the first book in the Chestnut Spring series, which, if you don't know, is just romance books, and they're interconnected standalones. And I'll Die on That Hill, it's a great book. Heartless is the second book in the Chestnut Spring series. Same goes for Heartless, I'll Die on That Hill. That I love those books, they're so cute. I'm Glad My Mom Died is one of those books where I was really surprised I liked it as much as I did. Like, I went into it as blind as I could have if you grew up like watching Jeanette McCurdy as an actress, which I did. So I was kind of like aware of some things, but other than that, like, I didn't do any research before reading the book. I like to go into books like kind of blind. But this book, I think it lives in my head rent free. Wild Love, I think I'll Die on That Hill. This is also by Elsie Silver, just like Flawless and Heartless. And it's just a great romance book. The Little Prince, I've read this book like literally like 4 times. I think every single time I read it, I discover something new and like learn something new. The way the author simplified the structure of society and put it into a children's story, and I do say a children's story because I genuinely believe that a kid could read it and like enjoy the story. They just wouldn't be aware of like the depth. But as an adult, you read it and you pick up on so many things and you learn so much. So I think I want to say it altered my brain chemistry, and I think it will alter it even more every single time I read it. Reckless, I'm afraid, is a book that lives in my head rent free. Reckless is the second book in the Powerless series, and I was just so obsessed with the characters after reading Powerless that I literally jumped straight into Reckless, and it lives in my head rent free. Literally can't believe that I have to wait another year for the other book to come out. Flowers for Algernon. A friend recommended this to me. If you're watching this, shout out to you, because this book literally altered my brain chemistry, and I think everyone should read it. I literally made my husband read that book. 100 Years of Solitude. This is another book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the Colombian author. This is hands down, if not my favorite book, it's in my top 3 of favorite books ever. As I was reading this book, I was like, how is this man writing this? Like, it's just such a beautiful piece of literature that I think because of that, it altered my brain chemistry, just because of like how it's written. Night Road by Kristen Hanna. This book lives in my head rent free, and the reason is this is the first book that got me into reading when I was like 12. Should I have read Night Road back then? Maybe I probably shouldn't have read it at 12. It touches on heavy subjects, let's leave it at that. But this book lives in my head rent free just for being the book that got me into reading in the first place, and because of that, it will always hold a special place in my heart. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I was so pleasantly surprised. I had such a fun time. So I'm just gonna say I'll Die on That Hill. I'm kind of actually so proud of myself and my rankings because I haven't touched the 2 lower tiers, which is a good sign. Means I had a good taste in books even then. I probably shouldn't jinx that. Powerless is the prequel to Reckless, and I'm just gonna go ahead and lives in my head rent free too. I'm just so obsessed with that world and those characters. Aura. So in English you would probably pronounce that Aura, but this is Aura by Carlos Fuentes. He's a Mexican writer. And this book altered my brain chemistry. It's just so up my alley that like it altered my brain chemistry. The writing is beautiful. It's written in the second person, which I almost never see. It's kind of like a creepy story, like kind of creepy vibes, kind of like a mystery. And it's like 60 pages long, so you can literally just sit down and binge it. I've read this book like 4 times. The Kite Runner. This book was recommended to me by my aunt, and I still remember to this day because it's one of my favorite books I've ever read. I think it altered my brain chemistry because I read it so many years ago, but even now I remember being super young reading this book and like laughing, crying. This book just had me in my feels. Normal People, I don't even have to say anything about this. This book literally altered my brain chemistry, and I think it made its way to number 1. A Court of Wings and Ruin. I think with this book I'll Die on That Hill. It's very politics heavy, which I love, so I really enjoyed that too. It was a really fun time. And then Queen of Shadows and Heir of Fire, I think I'm gonna put in the same category. I'll just Die on That Hill. Like, that series is very good. these were some of my favorite books from the series. The Book Thief. This book altered my brain chemistry. If you ever get something out of this channel, is to please read that book. What I love the most about this book is that it's narrated by Death, but it's not portrayed as Death is usually portrayed in the media. You know how they portray Death as like this mean character, this evil character that really enjoys taking lives and souls. In this book, Death is described as someone who is like burdened by this job, and she is very tired because obviously the setting of this book is World War II, so she has had a lot on her plate. It just altered my brain chemistry, and I think everyone should read that book. The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery. I think for this book, I'll Die on That Hill, this is such a cute little book. It's just a cute little story, and the fact that like the story revolves around someone owning a small little library is just so cute. Ensayo sobre la ceguera. This book altered my brain chemistry. It's about a town where blindness suddenly becomes like this contagious disease and starts spreading randomly, like just some random day a lady goes blind and it just like starts spreading. A Court of Mist and Fury. I'll Die on That Hill. This is such a good book, and like it's the second one in the Akatar series, and this is where the series really got me. Like this is where I fell in love with the series and the world. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I'll also say I'll Die on That Hill. This is such a good book, and I regret the fact that I listened to it instead of reading it so much, because this book has some of the most beautiful writing I've ever seen, and I just kept getting annoyed because I was listening to it and then I kept like making the note to go back later and find the sentence or the phrase that I wanted to highlight, and that kept happening to me so much. And then I feel like I could have connected more to the characters if I had read the book instead of listening to it. And then there were None by Agatha Christie. I think this book is a good book, and I don't think I would rate it any lower if I reread it. Marked, I think, is the first one in some series, like some vampire series that I read when I was like really young. I can't even remember. I think I bought the second book and I tried to read it, and then I just DNF'd it, and like that's where I left the series. Like that's where like I stopped reading the series. So I think this is our first charity work. I remember really liking it at the time, but I'm sure that if I read it again, I would probably lower the rating by a lot. The Courage to Be Disliked. I think this book altered my brain chemistry. This book is written in a conversational manner. I'm not gonna say the writing is like the best I've ever seen. I also can't really remember how the writing is, but I will say that it did alter my brain chemistry. I read it when I was way younger, like I read it a couple of years ago, and I wasn't that self-aware back then. And I do remember that this book kind of clicked something for me, like in my brain, but like other people aren't in charge of your emotions, which now sounds kind of obvious, but back then I was like, huh. So I'm gonna say it altered my brain chemistry. The Da Vinci Code. I think I'm gonna put this in charity work. I read this when I was younger, when I was in school. I remember really liking like the solving the mystery part of it. I remember really liking like learning about religion and learning about art. I really learned a lot of things reading this book, I will say that. I don't know if I would rate it the same if I reread it, just because I know the writing isn't the best. The Hunger Games series. I don't even know what to do with this series because I remember loving it back then, but I don't know if I would eat it up the same today. I'm just gonna say I'll Die on That Hill just because it'll always be like special to all the girls my age, like all the reading girlies my age. The Divergent series. I think I was doing charity work with this one. I must say, like just something about the world even then didn't like really click for me. The Pretty Little Liars series. I read this series so long ago that I can't even remember like how I can't even remember anything about the writing. I can't even remember. I just remember eating it up, honestly. I just remember loving the series. I remember I was reading it while on vacation on like the very first Kindle I had, like one of those first Kindles that came out, and I actually broke it because it got wet, and now Kindles are like water resistant. I think I have to say I was doing charity work just because if I read them now, I don't think I would rate those books as high if I read them now, which is why I have to say I was doing charity work. But that doesn't mean I didn't love them back then. Like, that was the me back then, and I ate those books up. I was so obsessed with the TV show. Like, who wasn't back then? But I think I'm gonna have to say charity work. I think the Twilight series, I think even now, rewatching the movies, I'm just like, she doesn't even go here. I remember being obsessed with the series, but I don't think it belongs anywhere on this list. Actually, I would say Divergent doesn't even go here either. And then The Fault in Our Stars, I'll Die on That Hill. I was so obsessed with this book, I literally painted my entire wall and wrote, what was the quote? The world isn't a wish-granting factory or something. I literally wrote that like on my wall. After reading this book, I went ahead and read like all the John Green books, and I think this book will always be like a pivotal moment for me as a reader and as a girl. This movie also made me sob. I think this story will forever be special for the girls who get it, and I get it, and I'm just gonna say I'll die on that hill. Okay, so that was it for today's video. I hope you liked it. I really enjoyed recording this. It was really fun because I got to experience, like, I got to revisit like opinions I had on books like that I read so many years ago, and it was just super fun. And I love just like ranting. I love oversharing, so why not overshare about books? So I hope you liked this video. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you stick around. I'll hopefully see you on my next video.